Good morning. Hey, good morning, Mother of Brett. Good morning. Good to see you again. Good morning. Welcome in. Blue Angles. And remember Allah. Derek and Gage, good morning. And Hale, good morning to you too. Good morning, John D. Mashburn. Hope everybody had a good weekend. It's Monday, but having a beautiful, beautiful morning so far. Yeah. I got my coffee. Yeah, no, I took my daughter to a concert last night and I didn't get home till like 1 a.m. No, it's like more like midnight. I didn't get to sleep till 1 a.m. Snake 305. I believe is that we exist in the moment. Tomorrow we may not. It's that simple. Yeah. Agree with that 100%. I think that's very true. We do exist in the moment. Carpe noctem, seize the night. Mm. Well, welcome in, everybody. I think I'm competing with a lot of atheist creators today. I thought I saw a bunch of them, but it's really the only time I have today to live. I figured I'd get it in. Yeah, what is your God belief? I don't know, maybe people are used to other. Let's see, do you believe we were created or do you believe we just appeared? Well, I definitely do not believe we were just created, John Monterosso. Do you believe we just appeared? I don't think it's that simple. It's possible, but it's also possible. There's also a bunch of other possibilities that are more plausible than a creator. I think loving thy neighbor should always be a big thing, no matter your religion. I agree, Mikey. Wow, that's rough. My husband and I left a concert last night because the main event took too long to show. Yeah, yeah. At least they actually started on time. But big reason why I got home so late it was because it was like 2 hours away. So it was a long drive to get there and a long drive back home. And lucky her, she got to sleep in the back seat on the way home. But she got to see her favorite bands play, so for her birthday, early birthday present. Omnientheism, one God at the center of all belief. Omnientheism. So sounds like offshoot of the singular consciousness thing in Hinduism. I've been good, hypothetical theist. How you been? Um, who did we see? Them was the opening act. Not impressed. Baby Bugs and Solia. All right, taking care of mom. Well, hope mom is okay. I believe we were all on a different path to the same place. Yeah, it sounds more like the singular consciousness thing. And you know what? In a way, I agree with you. Trouble with triple time. I believe we're on a different path, on a different path to the same place. I believe that, in probably in a different way. You mean though? She's in recovery. Well, I'm sorry to hear that, hypothetical theist. I hope she gets better fast. Okay, I'm old school. Yeah, me too. I'd never heard of them until she said she wanted to go. Of course, she added them to my Spotify, and I got to hear plenty of them. But yeah, them, THEM, all capitals. But typical, teenage music. Not that that's a bad thing, but if we just appeared, how can we deny a creator is a possibility? Well, you can ask it in reverse, John. So the same logic applies for if we just appeared. If it was random, we're all at different degrees in the circle of spiritual existence. Louis Lethbridge, everyone will confess Jesus is Lord or definitely know his name. See, I don't even know those names. Naco, Bear, and Medicine. I guess I'm older school. That's beyond me. Corral, you're a deist. Yeah, I believe there is a God and that it may watch over us but doesn't intervene. I've not heard of PJ Morton. No, never heard of them. I may have to check them out. Unity, welcome back. Hope you had a good weekend, Unity. Oh, it's Halloween time. I'm getting finger hearts now. Oh, is that Halloween? No, it's different. Okay, I thought it was like a severed finger or something for Halloween. Thank you, King Voodoo, for the follow. Appreciate the likes. The grants turn me on. Okay. All 360 degrees in a circle are true. Not quite sure what that means, but in a way that is right. All 360 degrees in a circle are true. Thanks, Logical. Good to see you again. The culture, what caused the Big Bang? No idea, and I don't think anybody knows. But I think I don't know is the best answer. I don't believe in God for the same reason I don't believe in Santa Claus. Welcome in, Charlie. Yeah, I would say a lot of ways on the same. I know this about theists, but what are your thoughts on Buddhism? I don't believe in it. I don't believe in Buddhism either, but I know a lot of atheists or Buddhists. There's atheist Buddhists. I believe intelligent design personally and believe Christianity has the most evidence. Thanks, Quark Blast. I do disagree with that, but a lot of people agree with you, Quark Blast. Perhaps the Big Bang was the Christ consciousness birthing forth. Yeah, it's a guest. I'm a secular Buddhist. Yeah, see, there's one right there. Our Lord and Savior is coming sooner than later. Better hope it's not too late. Well, yeah, I don't believe that. I don't think there's enough evidence for the culture. But ultimately, I'm not positive on the who. I do stand by intelligent design, though. Yeah. Well, I think it's a guest. A3, thank you. Man, I believe on Judicula. What is that, the word? I've never heard of that before. Man, there's just so many, all these new names, new names to me at least, that I have not heard before. That's really interesting. That's fascinating to me. You lose nothing but believe in Christ, but lose everything in not believing. Well, culture, what if Christ isn't the right one? So I mean, it's like 1 out of 4,000 chance. You just believe in one more deity than I do. So what if it's one of the other 4,000? We're still in the same boat, right? I lose time. Did you know only 7% of the population does not believe in a God? No way, Jose. I thought it was more like 30. But I think the point is majority of people believe in some sort of deity. Does that make it true, though? Yeah, thanks, Trouble with Triple Time. Yeah, that's what I'm here for. Facilitate a safe place for everybody. There are key points of evolution I find impossible personally. Yeah, there's a lot of evidence for evolution. So if there's a few points that are off, again, does that make it not true? Only 3.2% of Americans don't believe in God. Guess you got to define God. Yeah, like again, I saw like 20, but again, does that make it true? Just because 97% believe it? Because at one time, there was an overwhelming consensus of people who believed in heliocentrism, and that's been proven to not be true. Or not heliocentrism, geocentrism, excuse me. All religions talk about the same God. I don't know about that either. The God then world hates is the one I run toward. Yeah, there we go. I need more scientists in my chat. But, it's just funny how it comes down between evolution and God belief. It's like it's either one or the other, and that also doesn't make much sense to me. Because honestly, if your God is all-knowing, all-powerful, then it's possible your God can make evolution work. So, but I know it goes against the Bible, so the masses go one way, I go the other. You swim against the stream, huh, Tribble? You swim upstream. Yeah, nothing wrong with that. Or you go off script, you go off road, color outside the lines. It's all good. I love that. I actually encourage my kids to color outside the lines. But I used to do that a lot as a kid. And it's funny when you fill out the voter card, we just filled our absentee ballots in, and my wife was all paranoid about coloring the little circle outside the lines. Of the two unbelievable options, I believe intelligent design makes more sense. No one knows, though. Oh, Cork Blast. There's a scientist in here who can explain it to you if you'd like. I'd be wondering like which one of the key points you find unbelievable. I think many believers perform belief. I think that's why many things, it's a choice. Yeah, I don't know if it's much of a choice to worship me or else you go to hell. Worship me or you suffer eternal torture. Evidence for both evolution and intelligent design. I would disagree about the intelligent design part, but lots of evidence for evolution. Well, thanks, Derek and Crystal. What do you think happens after death? Nothing. We just go out like a flame and that's it. We're done. One-time shot. I'm way behind on messages. Oh, we're at 1,000 likes and we got somebody in the queue. My bad. Let's bring up Jacob. Very biblical name, Jacob. How you doing, Jacob? Oh, I think Jacob dropped down. Yeah, he dropped off. All right. No, Jacob. I'm Christian personally and believe in intelligence and evolution to an extent. Thank you for the follow, Kara, or Kara, whichever it is. Always color outside the box, exactly. There's not a scientist in the world who can answer all of evolution's holes. Well, that's true, but that doesn't make it untrue. Like, just because they don't have 100% of the answers. I mean, you don't have 100% of the answers of God. I can guarantee you that, yet you still believe. So, I mean, that's just like me saying you don't have 100% of the answers to God, therefore it's not true. All right, I gotta switch rooms. Give me just a second. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. Thanks for waiting. Let's see. I'm not a goddess. I'm just flesh and bone, but I'm the truth that you've always known. That sounds like lyrics. Arch Nephilim. I don't know what lyrics they are. Whole lot of leaning on your own understanding going on here. Well, culture, isn't that what we do? What we all do? Peyton, how do you think everything started? Well, no one really knows, Peyton. Possible the universe was always eternal, and the Big Bang created all the objects that we know about in the universe. I've yet to see proof that DNA can be created from nothing. I've seen theories, but none proven yet. Yeah. That's true, Quark Blast. I believe in Christ personally, yeah. I don't judge Christ by Christians. Not one of us has the mind of God. We have faith that evolution is correct with irrefutable proof. I do the same as the theorist. I wouldn't say irrefutable proof. I'd say extremely strong evidence. I mean, overwhelmingly strong evidence. Like, if evolution was a schmurder, evolution would be holding the knife with fingerprints, footprints, the same exact size as evolution, with the schmurder clothes on, standing over the body. And then somebody saying, well, that doesn't prove that evolution is true. I mean, that everything points to evolution, like literally everything. Now, could it be possible that evolution isn't true? It's possible. I mean, extremely remotely possible. But I'd just be interested to see, Cork Blast, if you sat down for 1 month each with an archaeologist, an anthropologist, a biologist, a microbiologist, a geologist, a botanist. If you sat down with each of those for a month, you would see all the proof that there is to see. Because each of the disciplines has all the evidence. And they all point to the same thing. And a cosmologist and an astrophysicist and all this. It would be very, very hard to deny it. Evolution has no key points that needed to be true. Well, that would be the interesting part is, oh, Mr. Chico. Well, let's bring up Mr. Chico. Good morning, sir.
Hi, good morning.
Hi there.
You doing?
Can't hear you too. I'm good. I can't hear you too well. So let me turn it up a little bit.
Now.
It might be me. I had the volume pretty low. All right. How's your weekend?
Oh, okay. Weekend was great. Yeah, lovely.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. I'm happy to hear that. I took my daughter to a concert last night, so I got home kind of late. I'm gonna get my coffee real quick. But
Okay.
I'm up for the grind. Yeah.
Yeah, I always bring it.
Yeah. Exactly. So, what's on your mind, sir?
Yeah, I don't want to say literally, I just joined. It's not been up to 5 minutes. And you were saying something about evolution. So you said something about the Big Bang, how, basically the Big Bang is what created all of everything. And then evolution is how we as humans got here from, So I'm like, from what I know, I mean, I wouldn't say I know everything or I know much, but from what I know, evolution is still like an idea of how it happened. Like there's no concrete evidence that it happened.
Hmm.
Or at least evolution in the sense that we were once what let me say monkeys. I mean, I don't know which idea of evolution you subscribe to, but the idea that we were once monkeys and we evolved to humans. I don't think that has ever been what proven.
Hmm.
Because if you remember, there's a lot of times when I ask you, what evidence would you take for God? Your
Right.
consistent response is repeatable, testable evidence.
Verifiable.
Yeah,
Yep. That's the three
verifiable.
things I
Now,
want to see. Yep.
if I'm to go by that same, criteria,
Hmm.
have we repeatably and verifiably tested that we came from monkeys or whatever idea of evolution is?
Yeah. So
We have.
in that sense, um,
Okay.
it's there is a like in anthropology, for example, there
Okay.
is a when I say repeatable, verifiable, and testable, the repeatable part is that there is a repetition, a pattern of all the fossils that they found throughout in the fossil record for apes and monkeys, for that matter, so that they could construct a tree. Now there are holes in it still, but they're making discoveries all the time, making new discoveries all the time. So, I mean, I last took an anthropology class in the early 90s. And since then, they've discovered way more than that. That that seems to confirm what they're saying. So everything points to a a pattern, and the way they do that is through studying the bones and the bone structure, like like how they figured out like the different species of hominids. That's what we really should call it. Of hominids is they look at the bone structure of the face, and then they see like similar bone structures, and then they can assign it different uh, species, and then they could say, oh, well, this looks like this species came from that species because of the bone structure, and and they found things, they found other artifacts that attributed to hominids. Like for example, like I said, I was saying earlier, if evolution were a Schmurder stuff suspect,
Yeah.
it would be like saying evolution is holding the knife that's bloody, standing over the victim, um, with the with the bloody clothes on, with the fingerprints everywhere, with the footsteps everywhere. Like all the evidence points right to that, to evolution as the Schmurder suspect. And then us saying, well, that doesn't prove that evolution did it. It's kind of like that. And then here's the other part.
Okay.
So it's not just the anthropological part, but then when you look at all the other science disciplines, um, like for example, botany, they found
Okay.
fossils of plants. Biology, there's stuff there. Microbiology, they can demonstrate evolution happens on a very very small scale, like with viruses, for example. Um, they they can demonstrate that. They can demonstrate like characteristics of evolution, I should say, adaptation, and other. Christy humanists can probably fill in what the right words are. I'm not probably saying because I'm not a scientist. So, but my stepson is a scientist, so we've talked about this a lot. Um, Geology, they look at the different rock formations and they can see, the soil patterns that match with uh, different stuff. So it just like I said, there's just so much evidence. Now, does that mean that evolution? I mean, there could be another reason for this. We just haven't found it, but that doesn't mean evolution isn't true or it's just an idea. When now let me ask you what is your definition of a theory?
A theory is I would say basically an idea that has not been proven to be true. It's
Okay,
still an
so
idea.
that's
There's research done, but it's not been proven to be true to the point where you can say, "Oh no!"
okay.
Like the fact that the sun is hot is not a theory; it's a fact.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like that's
And
been, yeah, it's been observed, it's been proven with beyond, beyond, it's been proven to a point where you can't even question it anymore. Because
yeah,
everything you've
and
just laid out now in response to evolution, every single thing you've laid out, I can, I can pick holes out of every single thing.
mhm, absolutely you could.
So
And
if it's a fact, if it's a fact, there would not be any holes to pick out. Or
right,
even if there were holes, I would ask you and you would give me an answer directly. But the fact that it's a theory is where it's like, we don't know what that is, but we are still doing research. Yeah, that's what makes it a theory and not a fact. At
yeah,
least in my own
okay,
understanding of what a theory is.
yeah, okay. So let me ask you this: what is a scientific theory?
I mean, it basically would be the same as a theory, but something that's scientific, that's related to science.
Okay. The scientific theory, well, according to the dictionary and scientific journals, it's different. So, scientific theory is something that has passed the rigors of the scientific method and is accepted as fact. So, there are, so as you know about the scientific method and how that all
Yep,
works.
yep, yep.
So in layman's terms, like what you said, something that has not been proven, that's more like that would be equivalent to a hypothesis in scientific terms. But when we have scientific theories, it has passed this hypothesis stage and undergone testing, verification, validation, and then on top of that, it's been peer reviewed. So then a consensus of scientists have agreed with it, doing their own testing, verification, and validation. and then the whole point of it is to try to prove it wrong. So the assumption is that there is a presupposition that the hypothesis is not true, and so it undergoes the testing phase, the testing, validation, verification, all that, the experimentation phase to verify whether or not it's true. So it's kind of the opposite of how we do it, and then that's how they made all these other discoveries, and also there is a link between evolution and satellites being in space. If you don't believe me about that.
No, I'm not going to say. I mean, I've never heard anything that ties evolution to satellites. So I've talked to you multiple times, and I've always said, you even if you tell me right now that you're a female, and I'm looking at you dead in the eyes, saying you're a male. If you tell me you're a female, I'm not just going to disprove. I'm not just going to be like, yeah, you're crazy. What are your reasons? Like, what are your So like, you can come with this. I don't want to say stupid. You can come with the most childish of ideas. You give me your reasons, and if it makes sense to where I can't,
Sure.
to where I can't, argue against it, then I mean, it makes sense for me to believe. Some people will say I'm illogical. Some will say I'm whatever or unreasonable.
Yeah.
But hey, look, it's bringing up ideas that even you can challenge, and you're calling me unreasonable for what? Holding on to that ideas. Thank you. I gotta be unreasonable than whatever it is. So as I said, everything you said right now in regards to evolution, like there's lots of holes in the narrative, and that's why I guess I would still say it's not a fact.
Yeah, and I can understand that. I can see that. Like when I sit here and say, yeah, there's a link between evolution and satellites, you just feel like, what are you talking about? That's just crazy talk. I hear that, and let me be clear. It is not like it's kind of a windy link. It's not like two or three things that link to it. It's it's a succession of things, and it's a lot of things, but there is a link that we can establish, as crazy as that is. So, but again, I tend to not talk about this so much because, again, I'm not a scientist. It's just, I have taken anthropology classes and stuff like that, but it's not something that I can intelligently talk about. So, but just because we can't intelligently talk about it doesn't mean it's not true, and things like that. But I mean, if you want me to study for 3 months or so and come up and give you a list of things. I can do that if you want.
Hey, actually, guess
I
what?
just have I
If you
have a
want
long
me to
reading
study
list.
about it, I'll go study about it.
Okay.
Actually, no
Well,
knowledge is lost. No knowledge is lost. But
yeah.
the whole thing, as I said, like when you mentioned evolution, you said we found different, fossils over time, and they show
Hmm.
similar, shall I say, similar structure, similar design, similar, composition, right?
Yeah.
While
Like there's patterns.
I don't
Yeah.
really know, okay, while I don't really know about that, me hearing this from from a neutral ground, like take the fact that I'm a theist, I believe there's a God and there's a creator. Take that out of the way.
Hmm.
You telling me there's a similarity, it still doesn't really tie up to the fact that one came from the other or one evolved from the other.
Yeah, I see that too. Like, um, it's just that there has to be, okay, so it's like they kind of did it like this. So they did it this way. They looked at the, like, for example, the human body, right? Because they found these fossils, and then they were like, okay, well, what's the significance here? And then they looked at like the human body, how that works. They looked at apes' bodies, how they work. They look at monkeys' bodies, how that worked. Um, and they said, huh, there's these differences and these similarities. They cataloged all of that, and then they started finding other similarities, like um, little things, like in other mammals. Um, the similarities in the vertebrates and the similarities in the digestive function, how the muscles worked, and all that stuff. So they were just starting to find these links everywhere, and so I think they were just kind of following the trail. It's, I mean, when you see it, it's really hard to say, well, it could have been something else. I mean, yeah, you could hold out for that because there is a lot of questions that haven't been answered, and I think that's the fascinating thing about this is that they found so much evidence, yet there's still so much that is undiscovered. I would encourage you though to go to your local university and talk to scientists of each discipline, like of the natural sciences, and just ask them about evolutionary evidence. Just ask for the evidence. Just kind of like what I'm doing. Like I talk to every person of every different religion, right? Like I leave it open. Yeah, that's what I would do.
So, quick question, which is more like a question you've also asked multiple times, is looking at this idea of evolution. Why can't we don't know simply be the answer? Why do we have to go find answers for it?
That's a very good question, and reason why is it's gonna be, this is gonna sound very hypocritical, but it's different. And here's why it's different. And you're probably rolling your eyes. Like, come on, trust.
I promise.
Come on.
Hey, look, when you give me your reasons, then I'll roll my eyes. Like,
then you'll roll your eyes.
Let's
okay.
hear your reasons first. Yeah, then I'll roll my eyes. Like, come on, man,
brother. I thought I heard. I swear I thought I heard you. I swear I thought I heard you roll your eyes just now. But okay. So let me explain it this way. I'll hold that. I'll take back the "it's different" statement. I just won't say that. But here are the reasons why. Science is the way science kind of works is they say they discover something, and then like I said, it goes through the scientific method, it goes through that rigor, and then it is to demonstrate or not if the hypothesis is true. And so once that has been demonstrated through repeated testing, verification, validation, then they feel comfortable making the statement, this is what we think happened. And, or this is what the evidence points to. So I think that's how their approach is. It's versus, say, we start with, in like a lot of religions, it starts with God exists, and then everything that all the evidence that supports that is points to that. And I mean, have you gone through a process where you just started with the presupposition that God does not exist and then looked at all the evidence? Have you taken it from that angle before?
There's okay. Let me. In my own personal, should I say, research, review, or studies, there is no
Yeah.
way for me to get to here without answering the question of where we came from, and there is no way for me to answer that where we came from without putting in a starting point in some ways, and the starting
Right.
point has to be something that's always been there.
Right.
Because if you say that thing was not there at one point, then how did it get there? What basically, when did it start to be there? Now, if you say it started to be there, it means it must have started from something else. It must have had a, you see what I'm saying? Like, say, take the Big Bang, for example. We all love to talk about the Big Bang. It's the beginning of all creation of everything. But creation of everything from what? Which again ties into my main reason for saying there has to be a creator, at least a starting point is,
Mm.
if the Big Bang is the idea that we all came from nothing, well, that doesn't even sound, it doesn't sound right that something came from nothing,
Okay.
like absolute
I.
nothingness.
Mm-hmm.
So
And
there's no way for me to do that without still in some way accepting the fact that there has to be a creator. Like the
mm-hmm.
equation, it's like mathematics. The equation doesn't add up. With if you
Okay.
take that beginning, which is the
Yeah.
idea of a god slash creator, the equation, everything fails from there, from then on.
All right.
At
So
least
I
in
would
my
say,
personal research, I don't know, everybody has different methods, but in my own personal
gotcha.
research, there has to be a beginning. There has to be something before anything.
Thanks for the likes, Chris. I would say it this way. Um, the Big Bang simply refers to some huge event that happened, like a major event. And so it there is kind of a misunderstanding of what exactly that term means, because you see, because the universe is expanding. So, so the Big Bang was kind of attributed to that because they see expansion. And, when things explode, they expand. However, it doesn't mean that the universe was created at that time. Because it's possible that there are theories that the universe was always eternal. And so is it now, again, I don't know enough about that to like how they got to that point. I didn't read, the intricate detail how they got to that point, but there is a theory that is out there. I'm going to let Chris, the humanist, take the wheel for a minute because he's the scientist here and I'm not. So I'm going to, yeah, thank you. Thanks for coming up, man. So
hey, I'm happy to be here.
Is there, yeah. So actually, you've kind of heard what I've been saying. So I know, again, I'm not a scientist, so I can't, I'm not an expert in this at all. I'm just kind of going by what I know. But maybe start with, if you recall anything that I said that wasn't quite right, you could just kind of, you can you can clean it up for me, and then maybe we can address, and then after that we can address what Mr. Chico's saying. Does that sound like a good plan?
Yeah,
Okay.
that sounds great. And actually, I really have very few notes. You and I have talked before, by the way, and I
yes, we have.
Me up.
You've
done a great job of explaining things. And for the record, I am a scientist and a professor, but I'm not an evolutionary biologist, nor am I an astrophysicist. But I do have to at least understand biological evolution in my field of agriculture, because agriculture is so dependent on understanding evolution. And I also teach evolution independently to students. I don't teach evolution as a class, but I've designed my own like short course on evolution that I send to people, usually through TikTok, and like I send them one mini lesson at a time, and then we take time to ask any questions and talk about it. So I put that out there, and there's no charge for that. I just enjoy teaching. So if anybody's
it sounds like someone. Are you doing lives at all?
No, I don't have enough followers. I have enough followers to do, to talk, obviously, but
to do lives, or I mean to do what's it called, to post stuff. Well,
Yeah.
okay. Well, I'm going to start encouraging people to follow you so we can get you to the minimum so you can start doing lives. Because, yeah, I mean, I think this is
appreciate that.
like having Q&As. Yeah, this is great.
But yeah, a couple things really quick. I was just going to mention, you did a great job of discussing the definition of a scientific theory. Most people think it's a hunch or a guess, but really it's a large body of evidence that has been confirmed to explain a phenomenon. So it's like when people say evolution is just a theory, that's the same thing as saying that gravity is just a theory. We know that gravity exists, and there is a body of scientific knowledge that describes it. Or the fact that germs cause certain diseases. That's known as germ theory of disease. And we wouldn't say that germs are just a theory. So yeah, great job on that. And then I think the other misconception, I was talking to my buddy Cork Blast in the comments, and we were having, for the record, a very respectful discussion. He was saying one of the biggest holes in evolution is life coming from non-life, and I absolutely see your point, Cork Blast. However, I just want to make the distinction that evolution starts with a cell that has DNA and is able to divide and replicate itself. And so the study of how life originated. Oh, sorry.
The guy he worked with him.
Oh, okay.
I think he's okay.
The study of how life originated on the planet Earth is called abiogenesis, and there's a lot we don't know about that, and that is a fair criticism. And so it may be that God's formed the two first cells and plopped them down in the ocean. Maybe that's how it happened. But what we do know is that evolution started after that, and we have lots of evidence of that. And I'll just pause.
Okay. Well, let me. If Mr. Chico is, you know what? Unmute when you're ready to talk. Okay, looks like he's on a call. So let me play devil's advocate for a moment. So, actually he's back. Are you back and able to ask questions?
Yeah, I'm back, but for whatever reason, my phone is playing two lives at the same time. Like I'm playing another live, so I have to do TikTok and come back right up, like immediately right now.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, come on back when you're ready. But so until he's ready to come back, I'll be the devil's advocate for now. So I'll play the role of the believer, of a God believer who believes in intelligent design, because I'm actually pretty familiar with a lot of these arguments. And so so if we can't explain how something comes from nothing, then why even believe evolution? Why can't we just say, I don't know?
Yeah, so that's a great question. The thing is, even if we don't understand where the universe came from or how life came from, we know that life exists on planet Earth, and we have a clear record of how life has changed over time. And evolution is just the study of how life has changed over time and the mechanisms that cause that change.
Okay. Is it so? Are you saying that it? So I guess I'm trying to figure out how that's different from when we say, we don't see how something can't come from nothing, so there has to be a creator. And if there's a creator, then there has to be some type of design, put into that. So how is that answer, arriving in that answer, different than how you arrived at how scientists arrived at the answer of evolution?
Okay, yeah. So I guess my thought on that is that if you believe in intelligent design, basically that an intelligent creator with a mind designed the species on Earth, then I would say that's fine. There's no way that I can disprove that. But from the evidence that we have, that designer, if they exist, used evolution as the way of designing, as the way of bringing life on the Earth, basically.
Okay. Well, now that Mr. Chico's back, hopefully you got your tech issues worked out.
Yeah,
but
yeah. I think it's
okay.
fixed now. Yeah.
Okay, so I can take off my devil's advocate hat now, and I can be just trust but verify. Since Mr. Chigo's back. So I think I alluded earlier to saying that to me, I see evolution like this: that like it's a Schmurder suspect, but it's literally seen caught holding the Schmurder weapon with BLOD all over the weapon, the standing over the body with bloody clothes, with footprints, fingerprints everywhere, handprints on the wall, with a big sign saying "I did it." But we actually didn't see it happen. So then, to me, that would be saying, well, that doesn't mean evolution is the Schmurder suspect, because we actually didn't see it happen. But everything else points to that. Now, is it possible that somebody else is the actual Schmurderer? Absolutely. It is possible. But I think of it in terms of odds, the odds of someone else being the Schmurder suspect with evolution standing right there with all the evidence all over pointing to evolution it's very unlikely, I would say. And I wouldn't call it silly. I would just say it's just highly unlikely. Would that be like an accurate way to analogize it in your mind?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think a popular misconception when people say I don't believe in evolution, when I ask them why, almost every time they define evolution as something that scientists don't actually believe. And so I think the biggest issue around believing in evolution is just not understanding it. And I blame the educational system. I mean, I'm 43. I was in my early 30s before I actually had a good grasp on evolution, and that was like self-taught. And then I went back to school and got my graduate degrees and learned more about it. But just to expand on what you said a little bit, and I'll try to be as brief as possible, is I think a lot of people think that Charles Darwin, just came up with this theory out of nowhere, and then we all just said, yep, that sounds good, that's what we believe now, and that there's never been any other developments. But in fact, Darwin didn't come up with his theory out of the blue. There were lots of other, in a movement called natural theism, where people who believed in God, most of them being Christian, said, hey, creation is beautiful and awesome. I want to understand it better. And so there was this whole movement in the 1800s, 1700s, and 1800s when scientists went out and explored the world. Darwin was one of those. He got his degrees in theology and natural science. And so he went out and looked at the world. But there were other scientists, even before Darwin, that proposed the idea of evolution. They said, we think that species change over time and become more adapted to their environments. But none of them could figure out the actual cause or the mechanism of how that would work. And so Darwin comes in and says, okay, I believe that evolution is happening, and I think that the cause of it is natural selection. And he provided evidence for that in his first book, On the Origin of Species, and that was 165 years ago. There have been 165 years of scientific discoveries since Darwin that have since provided even more evidence that evolution is true. And actually, if you go to Google Scholar and just in the search bar put biological evolution, you'll find around 6 million entries. Not all of them are specifically proving evolution, but there are literally millions of scientific studies that have contributed to our understanding of evolution.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, Mr. Chico, I had to mute you because there was some background noise coming from you. So, but yeah, if Mr. Chico, if you want to jump in and refute, ask, speculate, be skeptical, we're all down for that.
So the thing, I guess, when you say evolution, basically you're saying the idea of evolution is the fact that species change over time to basically adapt to their environment, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep, okay. That's a great.
So
definition.
I asked this question. See, I like just throwing ideas out there. Because for maybe, no matter, again, trust, you know me very well. No matter how crazy an idea seems,
Yep.
there is still something to learn. So I threw this idea out on Quora once, because I used to be very active on Quora with atheists. And so I threw this idea out there one time. I said, the guy there, I think he was also a professor of evolution, because he was explaining it very detailed. And I asked him, I was like, do you think humans can ever evolve gills to live underwater? And how would that happen? Like, is it that we're going to stand by the ocean for... I understand, the whole idea of evolution is that it takes, let's just go with millions of years, right? So do we have to stand by the ocean for millions of years, or do we have to begin to swim so long underwater to where our body then begin to develop gills? Or like, that's my whole thing, is how does one species just transform into another species with a whole different, I mean, basically maybe still
That's
the
a
same
great question.
vertebrae, still the same body composition or something.
Great
but
question.
How does that change?
Yeah, that is such a good question. Trust but verify.
Excellent question.
Do you want to speak on that?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
And again, I'll try to be brief, and please cut me off if I say anything that doesn't make sense. I'm happy to clarify. But yeah, so that's a fantastic question, because if you just think, how could a species randomly evolve gills, and how the heck would that work? Like, that doesn't make sense to me. But that's actually not what evolutionary scientists believe. So importantly, evolution is a two-step process, and I'm simplifying things here. But the first step is random genetic mutation. We know that when cells in our body divide, they have to copy and replicate their DNA. Sometimes the cells make tiny little mistakes in the copying, and those are mutations. And so cancer is an example of mutation that has gone bad. There's a mistake in the copying of the DNA that tells cells to overproduce, and that forms a tumor. So sometimes this happens in our sex reproductive cells, and so that would be either a sperm or an egg. In sexual reproduction, I have to be careful about TikTok words here. I hope I'm not saying anything wrong. And so you have these random mutations that are not guided; they're just mistakes. Some of these mutations are beneficial, some of them are neutral, and some of them are harmful. So the second part of evolution is natural selection. And natural selection just says that these random mutations that are harmful are probably not going to help an organism survive long enough to reproduce. If it's a neutral mutation that doesn't really change things much, it may or may not let an organism survive, but not going to have a big impact. But a random beneficial mutation is probably going to allow an organism to survive longer and be able to reproduce. And so over time in a population, these random mutations will permeate through the population, and that population will change over time. So that's another popular misconception, is that people tend to think that evolution happens to an individual animal, but that's not the case. Evolution happens in populations of organisms over time. And again, it's from a random process, genetic mutation, and a non-random process, natural selection. Just basically taking what works and keeping that in the genetics and dismissing what doesn't work. And so that's the way that organisms become more adapted to their environment over time. So to finish up, to address your question about could humans evolve gills, it would take random mutations that would cause us to form gills. That would be the random part of evolution. And then also, those random mutations would have to benefit us so that we survived longer and reproduced more in our population. So we couldn't just stand next to the ocean and hope that we would evolve gills, because that's not how it works.
Yeah, and going by what you're saying, Chris, the way I see it also is, in order to find a human species with gills, for example, like a lot of things would have to be in the right place for that to happen. Like, for example, the environment. So, and then in my estimation, at least two people would have to be born with gills, at least a male and a female, a biological male and a biological female. would have to be born with gills, and then those two people would have to procreate and create another, human with gills, and so on and so forth. And maybe there has to be at least 4, so you have enough genetic variance for that species to survive. That's kind of how I see it. And so we wouldn't just develop it. Like there would have to be at least 4 humans that would be born with this mutation, and then the 4 of them would have to, get together and create some babies with the same mutation, and then those babies would have to get together, and so on and so on. And
right.
So it would have to be like that. But yeah, it doesn't. But and I think it's been proven. I think it's called Lamarckism. I think that's the term for it. I don't know if you've heard that, Chris. Like for example, it's similar to let's say Mr. Chico. A European-born person, a white person, has a twin brother, okay? And one of the twins just tans every day. Like they go to the tanning booth every day, but the other one doesn't. And hey, Christina. And then they marry twin sisters, and then both sets of parents have children. It doesn't mean the person who tanned every day will have tanned kids. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I understand that.
Yeah. So it wouldn't. So it's kind of the same concept. And another way I likened it was part of natural selection is, there is kind of a luck factor to it. And here's what I mean. Like I remember studying about moths. I can't remember where. I think I want to say like England or something like that. And the natural the genetic, or the advantage that they have in natural selection, was the gray moths had the advantage over the black moths because they blended in with the tree bark. And so the black moths would tend to get eaten, but there were still that some survived. And then when they started mining coal in this part of the world, I want to say England, but I'm not sure. But they started mining coal. Yeah, it was England? Okay. So you know what I'm talking about, Chris. They started mining coal in England, and it turned all the tree bark black. And so then all the gray moths started getting eaten, and all the black moths survived. And then they kept procreating and creating more black moths. That mutation survived. So that's like an example of natural selection. And so we can see that on a micro level, like a small level. But imagine, because if we think about, have a species like that having millions or billions of years to do that, then you could see all kinds of different, what are called mutations start to become dominant because of just blind luck like that,
Okay, but I guess you see the which is kind of still the basic. I understand the whole process you guys have laid out. I guess my main, should I say, problem with the idea of evolution is that since evolution is basically adapting. I mean, maybe I don't want to say basically, but part of evolution is adapting, being able to adapt to your environment, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
See how when you said there were green moths that were blended with trees, in my head I'm thinking, if evolution is a thing, why were the black moth not able to evolve into green moth just so they don't die out, so they're able to survive? You get what I'm saying?
Yes.
Which is what brought me to the question that if for whatever happened, say we let's say we know in the next 200,000 years the whole earth is going to be covered in water, is there a way we as humans would be able to develop gills to adapt to that condition, or is it like, oh look, water is coming, we're gone, there's nothing we can do?
I think it's possible, and in the frame of the moths, the black versus gray, if we look at them as the same like genus or species, the same type of moth, I'm going to say it like that, the same type of moth, but they just happen to come in 2 different colors, then you could see that the moth has indeed evolved. But if you look at them as 2 different types of moths, then it looks like, well, the black moths had no chance before the coal miners came. And then you would expect that type of moth to die out. But if we look at them as the same type of moth, just different colors, then you can definitely say, yeah, that moth evolved. That type of moth evolved. So anything to add, Chris?
Yeah, that's so. This is a really, again, great
That's a good question.
questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
these are the types of questions where I never assume that people who don't believe in evolution are not intelligent. It's just that it
Right.
hasn't been explained. Like, you are asking questions that show that you are intelligent and have put deep thought into this, and no one has just
Absolutely.
taken the time to explain it. And that's, again, I blame the education system. But so the peppered moth in England is a fantastic example of evolution by natural selection. The key thing to understand is that all populations of organisms have variation. So if you look at the population of human organisms, for instance, we have different colors of hair. We have different colors of eyes. We have different heights. We have different skin colors. All of these things are just natural variation that happens in a population because of the way that genetics work. So in that population of peppered moths in England, you had natural variations, again, caused by random mutations. So some of the moths were white colored and blended in well with the trees. And then at some point, there was a random genetic mutation for black colored moths. Um, those black colored moths, however, weren't able to survive and reproduce enough that their genetics for black color spread through the population. So they were always kind of there, but they were definitely the minority. And because they stood out against the white bark, birds would pick them off. Like, obviously, it didn't pick off every single one, but they were a minority in that population. Again, just due to random variation. But then when things changed color because of the pollution, now all of a sudden these white moths are standing out against the black bark, and birds are picking those off more easily, and the black ones are better camouflaged, and so the black ones are able to survive and reproduce, and their offspring have that gene for black color. And so the population changes over time because of pressures in the environment. And that's all that natural selection is. It's just random mutations and the ones that are beneficial stay in a population, and the ones that are not beneficial tend to cause organisms to unalive, so they don't reproduce, and that set of genetics doesn't get passed on. Um, yeah, so that peppered moth is just a fantastic example. And actually, after they controlled pollution better, the colors of the trees went back to white, and the moth population changed back, and now it's mostly white dominant.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So you said something earlier. You said, I appreciate you, telling me that I'm asking intelligent questions. I mean, trust knows. I like, because
Oh yeah.
the
For
thing about
sure.
me is I like to think. Like, you see me just randomly speaking to myself, and you're like, "Are you crazy?" No, I'm thinking of
Yeah.
something in my head. It's a question that I heard somewhere. It could be a question about something I have absolutely no idea about. But I don't ever dismiss any idea or theory just because it sounds crazy or nothing. I ask. So you said, the thing is, evolution wasn't explained to us. Well, to let me say, to me personally, correctly, which would make me say, maybe should we take it all the way back to the beginning, like the beginning of life on Earth? It's going to be a long talk, but if you can make it not so much long of a talk, I guess my whole question is, there was a cell from the beginning. How the cell came about, well, that's you call it a biogenesis, life coming from non-life. That one, I don't really think anybody can. I don't think even you can explain that very. I don't think you can explain that. But let's leave that. So there was one cell, and somehow that one cell that had life, should I say, multiplied.
Yep.
That it kept multiplying until it became, there's this idea of evolution that says it's fish. Because I've read a few things about evolution. Again, I'm not just going to say because I don't believe in it, it's rubbish to me. I still try to. So I've read a few things that said we were all fish. Let me not say we, but at one point the entire living organism was fish, right? And somehow the fish came out of the water. And you see, at that point is where I have an issue: is how does fish come out of water and still survive if they were meant to live in water?
Yeah,
That was what led me to question: can we as humans then be, can we evolve gills? If those fish that actually had gills, if they were able to, should I say, devolve, like, lose that gill and, should I say, evolve lungs and whatnot to breathe air like we do? Is there a way we can also, like, that point is where I'm having an issue, is where one thing becomes the other
I'll be right back, guys.
just
Go ahead, keep talking.
because.
sure.
You understand what I'm saying? Where one organism becomes the other just because. And if that was the case, why does it not still happen today? I don't even want to get to the part of why it doesn't happen today, because a lot of people say, it takes millions of years or something. Since we don't have
Right.
millions of years, we can't observe that. But okay, well, let me give you the idea that millions of years. Even if it took millions of years, how do you explain? Because from what I know, if a fish stays out of water for too long, it dies.
Right.
Oh my God, it unalives. Sorry. So
Yeah. Yeah.
how did that very first evolution happen to where the very first sets of fish? I don't want to say the very first fish. The very first sets of fish that came out of the water didn't unalive. How did they, you know, just go about evolving to where it's now? I think I read there's millions of different organisms in the world today, and all of these organisms came from the same cell, from the very first one single cell. And you look at all these millions of evolutions, a lot of them shared the same geographical condition. So why did they evolve differently if they were in the same geographical space? In the, how do you say it? Enduring the same natural habitats, the same natural conditions. How did they evolve differently? I guess what I'm saying is,
Yeah.
you take a phone, you put it in the microwave, or you put two phones in the microwave, right? Same conditions, everything is the same. How is it that one exploded and the other became a popcorn? I'm just throwing
Ah.
out idea. So, like, how did that happen? How is
Yeah.
that's my whole, like, I can't get an answer to that, and I can't just go with we just happened. Like, that's my problem, is if I can't get an answer to that, then evolution, like, you can't, that's basically saying you can't even explain the beginning of evolution to me. You can't even
Sure.
explain the whole process of evolution. You just want me to say, oh, you found fossils, you found this and that. That's just my thing, is I can't get along with that idea.
Right. Yeah, those are excellent questions. And just to say, if anybody told you that it just randomly happened and you have to accept it, either they don't understand evolution or they're not trying to spend the time to actually explain it properly to you. So I'm sorry that they dismissively said that to you. So you said a lot of things there, and I'll just try to take it one at a time. You're absolutely right about the origin of life. It's a mystery. We have some ideas. We've done some laboratory experiments that showed how parts of early cells could have formed, but I agree, it's one of the most difficult things for me to comprehend. How did DNA evolve? How did a complex cell evolve, and then start evolving into lots of different organisms? I can see the evolving into lots of different organisms, but I can't see how did that first cell, just happen, because it's so complicated. So scientists believe that that took probably around a billion years or so, and maybe given enough time, chemicals just do what they do, and that happened. But I agree, that's a mystery, and we don't exactly know how that happened, and we may never know exactly. So valid point. So second point, you said. So I want to correct something. You said at the time that all organisms were fish. That's not true. There was only one branch of organisms that were early fish. There were lots of other organisms living in the oceans. There was only this one group of fish that started hanging out next to the shoreline, just like we have fish that hang out next to the shoreline today. It's a niche environmental habitat where you can have access to particular types of food, right? And so what we imagine happened based on the fossil evidence is that some of these fish evolved and adapted to be able to jump between puddles. So basically, they still breathe underwater, but they evolved fins that were differently shaped that enabled them to hop from one puddle to the next so that they could better access food. Again, that was caused by a random mutation, or actually a random set of mutations. They didn't just decide to do that. Nobody was guiding that process. They just evolved the ability to hop between puddles because those random mutations happened. That allowed them to access habitats where they could better get access to food, they could better reproduce, and so the genetics for being able to puddle jump basically spread through that population. Over time, there were random mutations that led to differentiated structures in their gill system. So they had gills, they breathed oxygen through the water, but random mutations led to the development of early lungs where they could get oxygen from the water, but they could also get a little bit of oxygen from the air. And that would allow them to travel further distances between puddles. And those that could do that would, again, be better able to survive and pass on their genetics to their offspring. Over time, you get an animal that spends half of its time in the water and half of its time on land. That's an amphibian. And so that's population was the ancestor of all amphibians. One branch of that population eventually started staying on land most of the time, and it had random mutations that led to the production of hard shelled eggs. And those became the ancestors of all reptiles. One branch of those reptiles became the dinosaurs, a branch of those dinosaurs became birds, and one branch of those reptiles started getting smaller and eventually developed some new interesting mutations, including hair, the ability to produce milk, and give birth to live young. Those were the early mammals, and then we descended down from there. So I know I just talked a lot at you. I'm going to pause there. But the thought, again, the key concepts, and then I'll be quiet. The key concepts are random mutations, natural selection that favors beneficial random mutations, change over time happening very slowly, and then common ancestry.
Well, I mean, everything you explain now is, I would say you were consistent. Like the way you explained it, it does sound, how do I put this? You're coherent, like it follows, it does follow, but it's still the pain of how. I guess maybe this is one of the questions where we just go with, we don't know, so we don't try to question. But we see fish these days on the shores. We don't see any one of them. We don't see any one of them just hopping out of puddles, and basically we don't see any one of them continuing this process that you've just read up and you've just laid out. Like we don't see anything happening. Another example that kind of I guess that will kind of take on what I'm trying to say is the whole point of evolution is adaptation. I'm not going to say the whole point, but majority of the point of evolution is adaptation. So we develop new, should I say, physical structures or body structures to adapt to our environment. Again, if that was the case, I guess people living in the Antarctica, how cold it is, they would have developed fur, so thick that they wouldn't need coats. Or you understand what I'm saying? Like that idea of just saying, they developed because they were in a place for so long or because something happened naturally. What is the natural thing? Oh, we don't know. Like, I promise you, I'm not making fun of anything you've said. I'm just saying this is the thought I've been having is we don't know these things, right? We didn't see it happen, but because of bones and fossils we found, we are concluding that this is what had to have happened. It just doesn't sit well with me. Because if I ask you now, okay, how did we know that, the fish did this jumping of puddles around? How do we know that? We weren't there. There was no, and I know we can see some, we were able to see light some years back, but we don't see that happening. We don't even see it happening now. So how are we able to come to that conclusion?
Okay, yeah. So again, great questions. So we do actually see that adaptation happening in species that are alive today, which is what gave us the idea for it. So if you Google mudfish or lungfish, these are examples of creatures that do hop from puddle to puddle in order to get food or escape predators. And so we didn't just come up with that idea out of the blue. We see evidence of that happening today. And we thought, well, it makes sense that that might have happened, a few 100 million years ago. Now, you're absolutely right that no one was alive at that time. We did not see that. We're just putting the evidence together. But we see a clear line of fossils in clearly defined layers in the fossil record in the rocks, where we see a progression from fossils that just look like fish, and then a little bit higher than that, we see fossils of fish that have different structures in their bodies. And then above that, we see fossils of fish that seem to look to have structures that would have allowed them to hop around. And then above that, we see fossils of fish um, that look more like amphibians than fish. And then above that, we see fossils that mostly look like modern amphibians, and so on and so forth. So there's this progression in the fossil record in order that makes us think, you know what? The best guess is that this is an organism or a population of organisms, excuse me, that evolved over time. And it's not just fossil evidence that lets us know evolution is true. There's lots of different lines of evidence, but the other big one is DNA. Just like you can take a paternity test to see if your father is actually your father, you can compare the DNA of any two organisms and tell that they are related. And the amount of difference in the DNA tells you how far back they had a common ancestor. And so it's not just the fossils, it's all these pieces of evidence that we put together. But and then one final point to address your other question about like why haven't people, for instance, in Antarctica um, evolved like hair or things so that they don't need coats. Something like that, number one, is random. Just because you're in a place where a certain adaptation would be good for you doesn't mean that your population is going to evolve that because mutations are random. It's important to understand that like 98% of all of the species that have ever been alive on Earth are now extinct. Those are populations that did not evolve and adaptations that were good for their environment, and therefore they their game was up. And the ones that kept going were the ones that had random mutations that led to adaptations that were beneficial.
Okay. Well,
I know I've been talking a lot, like
no.
and I apologize
Everything.
for.
I promise
I hope
you,
I'm
you
not
made
steamrolling
sense.
you.
You made sense. You know, how do I put it? Your construct was very, very understandable. Like everything you said was understandable. But you see, still a few questions in that narrative. Say, okay, we look around, we see multiple organisms with the same DNA, right? Me looking at that, I can say, I mean, I know I'm a theist, so maybe there will be some bias in this. But me looking at that, I can say, well, that just proves that they all have the same designer or the
Mm-hmm.
same, you know, because say, look at an iPhone. Take an iPhone 1 to an iPhone 16 that just came out. They all have basically the same design if you look at it. But that doesn't mean they evolved. It just says, okay, they all have the same designer. So why are we not able to say these things all had the same designer? Is why they have, you know, should I say matching uh, uh, characteristics?
Yeah, that's another great question. So, number one, I just want to say that it could be that there is a God that exists that designed evolution to happen this way. Or it could be the case that a God designed all of these organisms at the same time and created them at the same time. I don't believe that because, again, the fossil record doesn't demonstrate that. If you dig down through the rock, you will find that the oldest rocks at the very bottom have very simple organisms, and that the layers of rock at the top have organisms that are closer to the ones that we see today. So you could prove evolution wrong by finding, for instance, a rabbit fossil in Precambrian rock. That's not a prediction that evolution would make. So that would totally throw the whole thing out of balance. But what we see is a clear progression from bottom to top in the fossil record of simple organisms getting more and more complicated in telling the story that I mentioned earlier. Um, so yeah, so in terms of I'm sorry, what was the second part of your question? I kind of lost the thread there.
The first one was, the idea that same characteristics or same
Oh,
composition could mean, same designer instead of saying, oh, we evolved.
yes, thank you. So it's a good point. So maybe God is just using DNA, and obviously, two organisms that look similar are going to have similar DNA because those are the building blocks to make those things look like that. It doesn't necessarily mean they're related. That goes against our understanding of genetics. Like we know by again through DNA testing that we can tell how related people are by how similar their DNA is, and we can see genetic markers in those populations that prove that two people are related as opposed to just happen to have similar DNA. If you have similar DNA, you are related. But there's even more evidence than that. So, for example, there are clues in the DNA where things happen that serve no evolutionary purpose but are still held in common. So, for instance, humans have one chromosome less than other apes and monkeys. And we know that that happened because two chromosomes fused during our evolution. Those two chromosomes, like if you split this one chromosome, and I can't remember which one it is, but if you split it in two, it looks exactly like the two independent chromosomes in apes and monkeys. Um, there's no reason genetically why that would be the case. That doesn't have any benefits. It's just something that randomly happened. And so I don't understand if a god was designing all of these animals that he would fuse these two chromosomes for humans, but have them split apart for monkeys and apes. That seems like evidence of something that happened randomly that shows that we're related to those
Um, uh, I mean, I have to disagree with that last point you just made.
animals.
Because,
Okay.
okay, going back to the idea of an iPhone that I said, that's like looking at an iPhone 16 with three cameras, looking at the first one with one camera and saying, oh, it has to have been evolution because we don't think the designer will use three for this and use one for that. It's still, I guess, I guess at some point we have to agree to disagree because
Yeah,
I'm not really seeing anything that points to evolution in a way that I wouldn't have any questions. I mean, everything there's always going to be questions. No matter how much you explain, no matter how much I
sure.
explain God and everything to you, you would always have questions. But
Sure,
if the
exactly.
answers I'm getting are only begging more answers, in
Yeah.
some ways that tells me, yeah, maybe just agree to disagree.
Yeah, and that's totally fair. Like, I don't want to barrage you with like 165 years of science. Like, all of the questions that you are asking, again, are incredibly valid, and there are explanations. And to be fair, an evolutionary biologist could probably explain them more succinctly and accurately than I could. But the answers are out there. There's millions of scientific studies on evolution that do explain all of these things. There's other lines of evidence like embryology. There's other evidence of evolution like vestigial organs. So like whales, we know evolved from animals that used to be on the land. One of the lines of evidence for that is the fact that they have tiny little back leg bones that don't serve any purpose, but they're there because their ancestors used to have hind legs. There's things in the human body that we have that we don't use anymore, like wisdom teeth. It seems to me that a perfect designer wouldn't make it so that our mouths are too crowded and that we have to have surgery to remove our wisdom teeth. Otherwise, we risk infection or unaliving. However, it makes sense when we look at the fossil record that ancient humans and human ancestors had longer jaws that would have been helpful for chewing meat and plants that weren't cooked. And so those extra teeth and those longer jaws would have been really good for that. But now, because we cook our food, we don't need a longer jaw and extra sets of teeth. And so that's an example of common ancestry. I mean, there's lots of these types of things, and they may not be convincing to you, and that's okay. As I tell my students, it's you don't have to believe in what I'm telling you. You just have to understand why scientists believe it. So I think that's the most important thing, that you understand evolution, even if you don't ever believe it.
All right. Well, you've done a whole lot of explaining for me, and I really appreciate the time you took to explain. As I said, I don't really, accept most of your answers, because even the one you just said something about wisdom teeth, again, it still doesn't, disprove the idea that, okay, fine, let's say at first we were designed with wisdom teeth, but we evolved, and the design from back then continued up until now. That doesn't mean evolution, because if it was evolution, okay, I guess it would be something like, well, we don't need the wisdom teeth anymore. Why is it still there? Why have we not, I guess, devolved? If you understand, I used the word devolve earlier. Why have we not devolved the wisdom teeth? Why is it still there?
Yeah, that's another great question. I'm happy to answer it, or I can just stop here. Trust but verify. I think you're muted.
Sorry about that. I said we'll make it the last one because I do have to go.
Yeah, that's fair. This has been an awesome discussion. Thank you so much for
Absolutely
giving me so much time to talk about this.
Oh yeah. Oh no, you can answer that last question. That's what I meant to say.
Very good.
You can answer that last question.
So this is another important part of evolution. Sometimes non-beneficial characteristics continue in a population if that organism is adapted well enough to its environment that those characteristics don't make everyone unalive. And so what I mean by that is humans are so good at being adapted to our environment that, yes, even though we have the wisdom teeth issue, that wasn't a big enough issue in evolution that it caused us to completely wipe ourselves out. Like, we have other things about us that allow us to live long enough to reproduce. And usually wisdom teeth isn't too much of an issue until you're a little bit older. And so, again, evolution just cares about passing on your genetics to the next generation. And so, as long as you live long enough to do that, traits will survive within a population. So, most of them are going to be beneficial, but sometimes some non-beneficial traits can kind of sneak in there on the backs of all the good traits, if that makes sense. So yeah, I'll pause there and be done. Thank you again so much for this, for both of you.
Thanks,
and
Chris.
The folks in the chat.
Yeah.
Great conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for coming up, Chris. And I think I would just end this, just encourage you to, just go to your local university and talk to the people in the natural sciences, like geologists, biologists, anthropologists, archaeologists, etc. And everything will just point to this pattern, like what he said about the geological record. When you start digging down in the soil and you see the different fossils, and you can just see the how it changes, the deeper you go, just things like that. Like he said, you wouldn't expect to find a rabbit fossil in, where we see like very basic, like insects and, like arthropods, for example, from 500 million years ago. You just wouldn't expect to see it. And so far they haven't. So, kind of things like that. It's, and it was because of these things, they were able to do things like carbon dating and all the other, and the new ways that they can date things and kind of figure out, oh, okay, well, we think this is about how old it is, So there's just a lot of things that point to it. But you're right, it doesn't solve the eternal question, the original question, how did it all start? Like, how did that cell get here? Yeah, they don't have an answer for it. I used to, when I was a believer, I did hold the belief at one time that
that there was still room for a creator and evolution at the same time. And of course, that, if you go by a strict interpretation of the Bible, for example, you can't believe both of those things. So one thing has to get compromised. So, but I get it.
There was one more thing I wanted to say. It's not really more like a question. It's more like I guess it is a question, but I'm not expecting an answer. I just wanted to point it out. He said
Sure.
something earlier. He said I think he said millions of research done in relation to evolution and, evolution generally. So my thing would be, which is the same question I asked you at first, is why is the answer not simply we don't know? Why do we have to carry out millions of questions, millions of research into evolution, but there's literally what? there's no research into anything that has to do with God. Why?
Research into what has to do with God, like establishing the link to that. It seems to me that there are people that are trying to do that. And
no, I mean, in the scientific community, like, it's like in scientific community, there's the possibility of God is just not there. Like the idea that there has to be a God or something like that is just not there. And I think that's why personally, I think that's why every scientific discovery or research we try to make always leads to, we don't have an answer for it, but we're going to keep doing more results because we don't want to say it's good. Remember I said this before, like we don't want to say it's good, so we're just going to keep doing more research and more research and more research. It doesn't matter how long it takes, as long as we don't say it's good.
I understand. Yeah, honestly, it's not like that. It's, from what I understand, and again, Chris, you can verify or clean it up for me. But from what I understand, if you take the definition of, say, of phenomenon or supernatural, it's that which can't be explained by science. And so all of these things, like all the scientific discoveries were at one time considered phenomenon or supernatural. And Chris, again, jump in and just cut me off and just say, nope, that's not right. So, but they were all considered that. And so when for example, a lot of the hypotheses were developed because of something that was observed, that was discovered, found, something like that. It wasn't that somebody just imagined it. What if there was this? That is actually pretty rare in the scientific community. And so I think to answer your question, there are, it's more like God is more like an answer to the question rather than a piece of evidence, if that makes sense. If there were, in a lot of ways, like what he said about Darwin, because Darwin was a theologian. And so when he went out to observe things in the natural world, it was from a theologian's perspective, and yet things didn't line up with what he knew as a theologian. And so he just wrote and observed things and then just started seeing these things happening, or patterns, when he went on his voyage. And so I would say that as far as that's concerned, like if we had, so I think the way it would start is if someone would discover God in kind of the way you're asking, is that there would be some phenomenon that would have to be looked at, and there's really no other explanation, and then they'd have to find additional clues to that. And I think, just from my limited perspective, that just hasn't been done yet. So it's not that they're going out of their way to say it's not God. It's just that the evidence just takes them away from that. They're just following the evidence.
Well, I mean, I don't want to take much of your time, but even to what you just said now, it's like when you mentioned something about how if there's no other answer, right? But we look at the beginning, the creation of everything, the beginning of the universe and everything, and there's no answer that fits that other than, there has to have been a creator or a designer. I mean, multiple theories. I've heard about multiple theories. I've heard about the theory of a multiverse, like, this universe, should I say, formed from a previous universe that experienced the Big Bang and the big, what is that thing? where the Big Bang is the expansion, and the opposite where everything contracts
Oh, the
and
great
expands
contraction.
again.
Yeah.
Yeah, the great
Yeah.
contraction. Yeah, like I've heard that idea or that theory, but to me that just seems like whoever came up with that theory has absolutely no evidence, nothing that points to that. Just doesn't want to say, oh, there has to have been a creator. It's just you understand what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
I've said this because I've said this as like when we ask all these questions, is anything that points to God, we'll be like, nah, we're not going to accept as God. We're going to find another reasoning, another way to go
Well,
about it, and that's just something I've observed. No
yeah.
offense to anybody. I'm just saying that's what I've observed.
No, you actually might have a good point, and it's possible that there may be a bias, towards that. It's possible because we as humans are naturally biased, and so if a scientist has the default belief that there is no God, then it would reasonably, it's very possible that if they're looking at it through this lens, that they may be subconsciously, trying to repeatedly prove that or, disprove God, if that makes sense. But again, if they're following the scientific method, and because then that would mean that if there is some evidence that they're just ignoring it, and to me, if they're following the scientific method, it just means that evidence, the likelihood is that it hit a dead end and they couldn't go anywhere else with it. So, but it's possible. I mean, it is possible that there is, but then, you would have to look at how many scientists are there in all these different fields, and not all of them are atheists. There's a bunch of believers in the scientific fields, a bunch. Yep. It's like 80% of the world believe in some sort of higher power. In the scientific field, I think it doesn't match with that. Like, you'd expect that there'd be, say, 80% of scientists who are atheists, but it's more like 50-50 or something like that. It's pretty balanced. And so even those scientists are like using the scientific method and supporting these different scientific theories. So, you kind of look at it like that, because then you'd have to say, okay, there's a huge conspiracy to go out of our way to say it's not God. Like, we're just disproving God. And that's, just the evidence. So again, if we look at the evidence, it doesn't support that. Again, it's possible, but, you look at the evidence and it doesn't really fly.
Yeah, I should just mention, I never said they are disproving God or trying to disprove God. All I'm saying is they are trying to not come to the conclusion that there is a God. And to answer what you said about scientists being theists, that is scientists that believe in God. I read something one time about a scientist, astrophysicist. His name is Neil Tyson. You most likely would know.
Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Yeah. He said something one time. He said, if he's working with theist scientists, the only one thing he requests from them is that whenever they're coming into the lab, they take off that idea of God, put it outside. Let's do science. When you get out, you can put that idea of God back in. But if you do that, if you're starting with that, then yeah, even as a theist, you still have to take out the idea of a God. Because, do you understand what I'm saying? It's like me coming up here saying, I believe, okay, I'm a theist. And we're going to talk about the creation of the universe. But then you're saying, oh no, if you want to come into this life, just firstly take the idea of God out of the equation and then let's do science. How would we ever come to the conclusion that there's a God or it's a God if you're already telling me to take out now, I don't know if every scientist does this. I'm just saying the fact that one scientist has said this and it's like he really held on to it real good. Like, if you're doing science, you have to take out God, because science and God, science is natural, God is supernatural. It don't mix. So you have to take out God from the equation. Again, if you do that,
yeah,
I mean, you understand what I'm saying? You will still come to the conclusion that, okay, well, really God can't, we can't put God in this equation.
Yeah. And I'll have to read the exact quote.
No, it's not a quote. It's more like it was more like a YouTube short I saw.
Or what he said. Yeah. And I'm not saying he didn't say it, and I'm not going to say, oh, it's context. I'm not going to really defend it because I don't know much about it. I will say though that, whatever that means, because I can see how just from what you said, I understand what you're saying. And I would say that, like, from my perspective, and this is just my opinion, I try to do that in my lives. Like, when I try to take off, say, my atheist hat for a second, and I try to understand it from the other person's point of view, and I think I do a pretty good job at that. I mean, I'm not perfect, but I really, really try to understand from the perspective of the person I'm talking to, like, where they're coming from in terms of what their beliefs are, why they believe it, how they figured out it's true. And so I can get to a level of understanding, like kind of Chris was saying, is, you don't have to agree with evolution, just get to a level of understanding to the point where you can really, and I think in some ways you do have that level of understanding, but again, there are some things that Chris told you about that you didn't know, and there is like 165 years plus years of study. So yeah, no one's going to be able to tell you everything in an hour and a half live. It's just impossible. So that's why I was saying in the beginning, I encourage you to go talk to scientists at the university, and just go at them with a list of questions. And if they're any good, like Chris is, because Chris was like patient, he was answering questions and all that.
I really appreciate his patience. Yeah.
And honestly, there are some professors, and there's some professors with attitude who are surly. They'll hopefully you don't run into one of those that'll just like act like they don't have time for you and stuff like that. They're out there. And but hopefully you run into a lot like Chris, who will take the time to answer your questions, explain it to you, and put it in a way that's in layman's terms. That's the other key. I think that sometimes the way it gets turned off is that they use these huge, big scientific terms that are hard to understand. And because I've run into professors like that in my time, and when they talk big like that, I see, it's like, that's how they talk, but it's just really hard to follow sometimes. And it's like, I need things broken down like I'm 5 years old. Like, I really go by the explain like I'm 5. And this is so hard to explain like you're 5. There's just so much to it, so. Well, anyway, yeah. All right. I do have to end with that. But man, thanks guys for coming up and, having that discussion. That was really, really cool, how that just kind of formed naturally. Chris, you just happened to be here. And, and I see there were other, I see you, Panama. I know you wanted to come up, but we had Mr. Chico up here. I think he represented your side pretty well.
Mr. Chico, thank you for the conversation.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
Thank you for the work that you do. I'm usually popping in your live
absolutely.
most days and just hanging out and listening. But thank you for the opportunity to let me come up today. I appreciate that.
I would, I'm thinking maybe one day we can do like another Q&A like this,
You bet. Just let me know.
You and me. Yeah. Okay. I'll let you know. But you know what? I'm sure you're going to have, Mr. Chico, I know you're going to have more questions. And that's cool.
Always.
Yeah.
There's always going to be questions.
And that's good. That's a good thing.
That's an awesome thing. Yeah. So, okay. Well, I got to go, guys, but thanks again for coming up. Followers, I did see your guest request, but I don't have time today. I have a lot to do today, so I got to get to work. But, follow me. So you see me come back up, and you can come back in and request to be a guest. But yes, thank you for all the gifts and the likes. So, all right, everybody, have a good day, and I'll see you next time. Take care.
Have a good day.
All right, you too.